the last thing I want to go over in terms of defense is just a real quick talk and demonstration about a concept of defending against certain types of throws. And in a future instructional, I'll be going over pummeling and throws and such, and it'll make a little bit more sense then in terms of how to defend against the throws. But I want to mention this now in the context of defending against your opponent's attacks. Hips down and sprawling are effective for leg attacks. However, when my partner or opponent wants to throw me, his goal is to be able to, for example, get his hip through and send me flying. Notice, if as he was doing that, I was to try to be moving back, I'm creating more space for him and making it more favorable for him to throw me. So I need to have a different type of a tactic and strategy. And notice, too, that in that situation where he's throwing me, his head is relatively high. I'm not going to be getting his head down. So this really does require a different approach in terms of defending. And I want to get this notion across now that when your partner or opponent is attacking a throw, and we'll just quickly demonstrate, for example, a headlock and actually first probably a fireman's carry, I want you to think of popping your hip in, because the more upright I am, and the more I push my hip in, the more difficult it is for him to get, my partner or opponent that is, for him to get his hip through, okay, or his shoulder through if he's trying to throw me. The other thing, besides being upright and popping my hip in, I want to tend to drift towards the front. Notice, if Colby is going to throw me, say with a headlock here, and I'm going in this direction, I'm helping him. If I was circling behind him, that would be much more dangerous for me. Notice, too, if he's doing that, if I pull my hips back, that's also much more dangerous for me. So, two principles here I just want to get across real quickly. One is hip in, being upright when your opponent attacks in that way. And two, drifting around towards the front. Let's take an example of a fireman's carry. If Colby attacks a fireman's carry on me, the worst thing I want to do is to kind of put my hip back. I'm sunk then. I'm going to go flying. What I would rather do if I see him coming through is being able to push my hips in and try to come out more in front here. I want my hips in hard because I want to make it difficult, one, for him in that situation to pull my shoulder down. Notice if he's doing a fireman's, and we'll go over the fireman's in the throwing instructional, he wants to keep my shoulder down, so I keep my shoulder up and my hip in, where he wants my shoulder down and my hip out to get space to come through. So this is just a notion I'm trying to plant in your mind at this point that'll make sense as we go along, but it's appropriate, I think, to mention this as we talk about defense. So again, if my opponent is, for example, attacking a fireman's carry on me, I want to be in this type of a position here, popping in to defend it. Now, I may then transition to some of my other stuff, head down and all of that. But it's important. My first response isn't this way because I'm going to go flying. Similarly, if Colby tries a headlock and I tend to back away or tend to circle behind as he's coming through, I'm going to go flying. So, if Colby tries to attack, and I want to grab, I want to have my hip in. Pull his hips in tight, so I'm not going to let his hips come through. If I back my hips out, his hips come through and he throws me. If I step in front and pop my hips in, he doesn't get his hips through and he can't throw me. It's very difficult. Whether it's an arm throw, we'll be going over all of that in some future instructionals. But if Colby is upright and really erect or really upright, and if he stays that way, I cannot throw him. I cannot throw Colby from that position. I can only throw him once I've gotten a little bit of space, at least with those type of backstep throws. Body locks are, of course, different. So, in review, when your partner is attacking, for example, fireman's type carry throw, or a headlock or an arm throw, one thing to consider is not to be backing your hips away and down per se. I want to keep my hips in. I want to get my hips down, but I want to keep my hips in and not backed away. So if Colby attacks a headlock on me, I grab him here. Notice if I get a little lower than he with his hips, or with my hips, he can't get his hips under me to throw. Okay? So when I step through, I'm kind of squat down a little here, but I'm upright and erect. And I'm not like this, and I'll tend to try to drift around the front to make it difficult for him to get his hips through.